Welcome to Module 2. Today we're going to explore how the mind works in coaching. This module is so much fun. I really enjoy looking at how the mind works and what this means for us as leaders in conversations. What we're going to cover in this module is the different types of minds that exist in conversations. And there's more than one. We as human beings are very complex creatures, and more than one can exist at the same time. How these minds are connected as a system and how they impact decisions and how we show up. Why it's important to be recognizing these type of minds and what this means for us as a leader, as a coach. But first, let's do a quick exercise. Give me a number, any number. Great. Now think of your favorite color and give me a number that represents that color. Great. Now imagine your body flowing into a number that represents the best version of you. What number is it? Let's take a pause here to reflect a little bit on what was your response time to each of those questions? And why do you think that is? This is the fun part. Let's now break down each of the structure of the questions. The first question, give me a number. It's easy, it's one word, it's a very logical answer. The second question, think of your favorite color. This is a little harder because of the word favorite. It's very personal. There's an aspect where you're searching within yourself. And then to connect that number that represents something that's favorite is also coming from within. This is a little more reflective answer. And then the third question, imagine the best version of yourself. This is even harder because we need to move into a little more reflective space to define our own understanding of the best version. There's no definitive single answer. It's really what's in the moment that we're searching for this answer. This is definitely a more reflective question. Do you remember the iceberg theory that we covered in the last module? You could say that the logical answers exist in the conscious mind. And the reflective answers are a little more into the reflective space and in the space that's unconscious or subconscious. Through these gentle questions and in a safe space, we can allow the other person to access different and more powerful parts of themselves. It is in this reflective mind that an individual can access more transformative and deeper perspectives of themselves. It's a very powerful space to be in. We'll learn more on how to create a logical or reflective mind space depending on the role that we're wearing as a leader. This will be a gradual build over the next modules, but for today, we're just going to cover definitions and why it's important to recognize them. You can find summaries of all these minds in the worksheets. Okay, let's do a bit of role play. You're my friend and we're meeting up for breakfast. I'm going to give you two scenarios and just observe on how you would react and respond to what I say. So we grab our coffees, we sit down, and you ask, how's it going? Oh, thanks for asking. I went for my usual run this morning, and you know how I just like to greet everybody. So I said good morning, and 5 people actually responded back and smiled at me. How would you respond? All right, let's try that again. So you ask, how's it going? Oh, thanks for asking. Well, I went for my usual run this morning, and you know how I like to greet everyone, but when I said hello and good morning to 10 people, only 5 people responded and the rest just ignored me. How would you respond to that? So, what did you notice about my 2 stories and how I showed up? And how did you respond to each? Were they different or the same? Here's the interesting thing. The data point for both my stories is exactly the same, 5 out of 10. And yet both stories are so different. The numerator and the denominator and how I define them is how my story is showing up. These perspectives of how I'm seeing my reality is called a frame. There are gain frames and there are loss frames. There is no wrong or right way to have a frame. It is to only acknowledge its existence and that this is someone's way of seeing their world.
Gain frames often exist in terms of having and sounds like I have, I've found, I've got, I can. This also includes I want, I wish, I would like. These are also gain frames. This is because it's something they hope for can happen. This possibility already exists in them. Loss frames often exist in terms of not having, or positions of lack and sounds like, I need, I don't have, if only something is missing. I feel lost, I can't, I won't. I don't reference these as positive or negative because having a loss frame is not necessarily negative and having a gain frame is not necessarily positive.
I don't use the term positive or negative frames. Here's the real question though, and why it's so important to recognize frames. It's the so what? The question is it easier to get a person where they want to be if they're in a gain frame or a loss frame? To help people move forward, it's much easier when they have gain frames available. Imagine working with a teammate or someone that only has loss frames available. It's really hard to get them to see past them. It's really hard to get them to move forward if they're constrained and bound by all these loss frames, because the loss frame really shows I can't, I don't have, I cannot. So trying to work with that material as a leader can be challenging. And that's not to say that we dismiss or don't acknowledge these loss frames. We do. What we want to do is allow them to create a different perspective, which is in a gain frame, so that we can use it as a base to help them move forward. And this is why it's so important to recognize the frames available to the people we're working with. We'll learn more on how to navigate and flip and use these frames in future modules. But for now, let's work on recognizing them. What do they look like? There'll be a few exercises coming up at the end of the module. Finally, the last concept for a leader as a coach is what I call human domains. How do we show up as people, as human beings? What are all the different ways in which we can show up? There are 4 domains that we work with as a leader, as a coach. There's a doing, a thinking, a feeling, and a way of being. When you're having a conversation, usually 1 to 2 of these exist and show up in that conversation. Let me explain in how they show up in these few examples. Take a moment to write down what data or evidence that you're noticing in how I'm showing up and why it sits in a certain domain. For this next exercise, I want you to try to identify which domain I'm operating in based on my response. You can write down the data or the evidence that gives this away. Okay, so you're my friend again and we're catching up for lunch. We sit down and you ask, how's it going? Well, I've just gotten feedback from my performance review. It's not what I expected. To be honest, I don't even know what happened. I mean, what did I do? That conversation happened so quickly and I'm really thinking what could I have asked? What other questions I could have asked just to get more clarity on what's going on? And so right now I don't know what to do. I think I'm just a bit confused. All right, so out of the 4 domains, doing, thinking, feeling, or being, which one is it and why? You can pause the video if you need time. All right, let's replay that. So we sit down and you ask, how's it going? I've just gotten feedback from my performance review. It was not at all what I expected. Give me 2 minutes. I actually need to write down some of the thoughts that I forgot to ask, and I think I need to schedule a meeting with my boss right away when I get back because I really want to follow up with this. Great. So, thinking, feeling, doing, or being. Which one and why? All right, let's rewind and do this again. We sit down, you ask, how's it going? Oh, hold on. I've just gotten feedback from my performance review. It was, oh my God, it was not at all what I expected. I don't even know what happened. And honestly, I don't even know if I want to stay in this job anymore. It just really feels so hard. All right, thinking, doing, feeling, or being. Which one and why? All right, last case. You probably know what it is based on process of elimination, but here's how it shows up. We sit down, you ask, how's it going? Oh, thanks. I've just gotten feedback for my performance review. It was not at all what I expected. Yeah. You know what? It's okay. I'm okay. I think it's okay. I'm just gonna sit with it, process it, and yeah, give me some time. But thank you for asking. Great. So I'm going to quickly flash each scenario and which domain I was operating in and highlight the key evidence that supports this.
The first scenario is in the thinking domain, and you can see this by me asking questions and processing out loud. The second domain is in the doing domain. I'm actively saying, just give me 2 minutes to write something down. I'm doing something in the now moment. The third domain is in the feeling domain. You can really feel the emotions coming through. And the fourth is in the being domain. I'm just sitting with it, being present with myself.
So, why is it important that we need to recognize these domains and how the other person is showing up? Well, the only reason as a leader, as a coach, is that we honor the domain that they're operating in order to create a safe space. We want to maintain that space for them. For example, if our teammate comes to us and is very upset, they're in a feeling domain, let's say, it doesn't feel very good when the other person doesn't respect the feelings or acknowledges them and tries to move us out of that domain as a coach. However, sometimes as a manager, because of business needs and what we need done, there are times that we will wear the manager's hat and shift that. As a leader, as a manager, you could say, we've got this deliverable in 3 hours. I know you're really upset. What can I do to support you to help push this through? This is shifting them from a feeling domain to a doing domain because of business priorities. And sometimes we just need to do that. There's no right or wrong way to be a leader in these instances. The whole purpose is for you to recognize that you have choice in the tools and the roles that you have in how you want to show up and create those opportunities for you and your teams. What we're going to do now is go into the sandbox. Let's play. I'm going to play a few transcripts, and what we're going to try to do is identify the minds and what evidence supports this and how the other person is showing up. This next exercise is a fun one. It's a simple one where we're going to look at how the mind works and using a transcript, identify which mind space the speaker is operating in and what evidence suggests this to be true. So just to recap, what we're looking for is in the mind space is the speaker in a logical or reflective mind space? And we'll go through this as an example as well. Are they operating in a gain frame or a loss frame? And what I'll do is also highlight this to let you know whether the speaker is in a gain frame or a loss frame and what suggests this to be true. And finally, what domain is the speaker operating in? Are they in a thinking, doing, feeling, or being domain? And this is important to recognize because we tend to most effectively in coaching conversations operate in the same domain that's dominant. And as I said before, there can be more than one domain, usually one or two on the table, very rarely three, and usually not four. All right. This transcript is an excerpt, an example of a conversation between a leader and their teammate around exploring stretch projects. And so it's really the teammate wanting to grow. I will read it through and then we'll go through the dissection, which is super fun. So what you can do is just as you're going through it and listening to me as I read out the conversation, just have a things like, oh, it sounds logical to me or it sounds reflective to me, right? Really just have a thought around what domain, what frame is it showing up in, and I'll highlight the pieces and explain why. All right. And so yes, the objective of this exercise is really very simply, we're not doing anything else than observing what minds are available in this conversation. And it's a really small excerpt that we're going to go through. All right, you ready? Great. So the leader starts off with, what's on your mind? Very neutral, logical. Well, actually, neither logical nor reflective. It's simply a question at this point. And the teammate says, I know we talked about exploring stretch projects or something to try that's outside of my current scope of work. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the recently posted program manager role for the business integration team. All right, let's pause here. It feels like that this person is definitely in a more logical space at this time. We're starting with facts. This is what's happening. This is what I want as well. And this is what's been happening in the organization. It's a fact. They are also, what I can feel here and sense is in a doing/thinking domain. And how this shows up is, well, I want to get your thoughts. So they're actually doing something in the moment. They are requesting something from the leader. I want to get your thoughts. And they're also thinking about it as well. And there's neither gain nor loss frames at this current time, although, yeah, currently no gain or loss frames that are very obvious at this point. So logical, doing, thinking, no gain or loss frame, which is fine. The leader says, yes, we did. What are you thinking? here in the thinking slash doing domain again. So what they're doing is they're actually asking for, what have you got on your mind right now? So it's actually the act of doing of the thought that the leader's operating in. And this is very much in line with what the teammate is actually in their domain as well. The teammate then says, well, I'm not sure I want to step into it right away. I mean, I'm not even sure I'm qualified. We're going to pause right here right away, because right away I'm also already seeing lost frames. There's two of them, two statements here that are quite interesting. The teammate says, I'm not sure I want to step into it right away. So there's a position of uncertainty. And then the second is that I'm not sure I'm qualified. So that's also a lost frame on the table. But something along the lines of maybe helping them with some of the work that they are doing, question mark. Is there something small that I could try to get my feet wet and see if it's something I would enjoy doing? Question mark. This is a great indication, for starters, of a thinking domain. When you see questions like that, question marks, processing in the moment, the person is in a thinking domain, right? Because they're talking out loud, they're asking themselves or the person that they're speaking to questions. So that's an important thing to note. The other very, very interesting thing here is, even though the person put lost frames at the beginning, they come to say, I could try to get my feet wet. Oh, there's something that they do want, is this attempt. And this right away is possibility. This is why coaches love gain frames. It's because there's a way that we can move forward in the conversation to help this person get what they want. So even though he or she started with lost frames, it's great that there's a gain frame on the table and still feels logical, but there's a little bit of reflection here, very small piece around, maybe I'm not, right? So that's small reflection here, but still primarily in a logical state of mind. The leader then says, I don't see why not. What can I do to help? And this is great. What's happening here is a gain frame. The leader's taking the gain frame and helping the person propel them forward. What would be different? And we're going to pause here just to talk about this, is if the leader went off to say, oh, what do you mean you're not qualified? I want to hear more. The leader is now effectively then putting a spotlight on a lost frame. And I just want to ask you, what happens when we put light or give life to lost frames? Sometimes the lost frames get bigger. And so here's where you, as a leader, being very aware of what's on the table, have choice in how you want to drive the conversation. So the leader very actively doesn't touch the lost frames. They immediately go for, hey, you want to try? I can help. And that's really great, because what we want to do is really help move that person forward, which is the role of a leader as a coach. It's really to drive possibility and potential. Did you want me to speak to Carmen? She's a hiring manager, and this is in a doing domain, which is very logical. The team says, I do want to try. I'm not sure of the arrangements typically in these situations where I can do some work on the team and still be sure I'm delivering my work to you and the team here. How will it work? I think that's my real question to start. I'm more curious about how this organization positions me for stretch projects and what it would mean for resourcing, commitments, or reporting. I just want to be sure I can handle everything. All right, great. There's some doing, more thinking though at this point, right? They're checking in, but they're also checking in, hey, would this work? So the thinking's about the future. This is a great piece. I do want to try. Oh, I love this. And this is actually a continuation of that gain frame, right? The leader, so the teammate put out the gain frame first right up here. The leader continued the gain frame, and the teammate caught and moves it forward. However, there's all these things on the table that I want to explore. I'm not sure about the arrangements, which is a loss frame. However, it's quite subtle in this because it's really a thinking little piece of the bigger gain that this person wants. So the teammate really wants to try something different. Oh, but there's these little questions. That's what's on the table. But the real thing to really acknowledge is that there's this big gain frame here is I want to try. And that's what we want to honor. How will it work? Thinking, doing, still a little more logical in this. The leader goes to say, that's a fair question. I think as long as both managers are aware and very clear on percentage allocation of time and commitments,
It's usually managed quite informally, of course. When budget rolls around, it's something we need to be sure we can deliver as a team. Great. So this still operating in a thinking/doing domain, really giving information. So still logical, fair question. And I think as long as this happens, we can make it work. This is a gain frame, which is amazing because they're continuing. See, so this person tabled one possible loss frame about why it won't work. The leader did come back to say, hey, let's flip that around and debunk or kind of turn this loss frame around and say, wait, it's doable. And so now there's gain frames more on the table for the teammate to work with. The teammate says, oh, that makes sense. So yes, could you introduce me to Carmen? And this is great, right? This is gain frames. They want to move forward. It's quite logical and in the doing, right? And so what they're doing is actually acting on the information at this point. The leader said, absolutely. I appreciate you coming to us and exploring options, which is a gain frame as well. And that's the interesting part about looking at conversations really analytically and dissecting them. This will allow you to really see is, oh, what's on the table? How are people thinking? What is the mindset available? What is the material available that I can use as a leader to drive forward my business outcomes and goals and working with the teammate? So to recap, what's happening is primarily in a thinking doing conversation. Most of it is logical, which is okay. There are some loss frames on the table, which we didn't go into, the leader didn't go into, and the leader really steered towards gain frames. So you'll see some of the loss frames at the beginning coming from the teammate. However, the leader is able to turn things into gain, and move the teammate forward. That's amazing. Well done. So this is how we dissect very simply the minds that exist in a conversation. We're going to explore this more when we talk about the power of observations and the so what.
Well done. And just let the concepts sit with you. Let the definition sit and marinate. And a great thing that you can practice is as you go out into the world as a leader, try to pay attention to these minds and whether you can identify them and what evidence or data supports that. This is great practice for you to start training that muscle, which will help serve you when we move into the power of observation. There are more practice use cases in the library if you'd like more practice. I'll see you in the next module. Mind or mine what's being said.